Mechanics do not just fix broken cars, they fix the terrifying results of pure human stupidity. We tracked down the absolute weirdest, most unhinged, and painfully hilarious complaints customers actually brought into auto repair shops. From engines fueled by peanut oil to possessed minivans, this is what happens when bad drivers demand free repairs for their own insane mistakes. 1. Customer rage reached nuclear levels when a lady demanded a brand new dashboard because her cup holder quote-unquote snapped off. She was furious that her iced caramel macchiato ended up all over the floor mats. The mechanic took one look at the carnage and had to break some devastating news. She had not broken a flimsy cup holder. She had been balancing massive 32-ounce drinks on her ejected CD player tray. When told she had practically decapitated her stereo, did she apologize? Nope. She threatened to sue for bad automotive design. 2. There is nothing quite like a phantom clunking noise to ruin your day. One guy swore his suspension was collapsing every time he hit the brakes. Technicians spent hours checking struts and mounts, finding absolute perfection. The master mechanic finally test drove it, slammed the brakes, and heard a terrifying thud from the back. Turns out, the genius left a loose bowling ball rolling around his empty trunk. He happily paid $150 an hour for a professional mechanic to discover his terrible packing skills. 3. What would you do if your dashboard suddenly displayed a glowing yellow submarine? One panicked driver rushed into a lube shop, screaming that his crossover was warning him about an imminent flash flood. The tech stared blankly before explaining. This aquatic vessel was actually just the standard check engine light. Instead of feeling relieved, the customer doubled down. He aggressively argued an engine looks nothing like that symbol and accused the shop of covering up a secret government water damage recall. 4. Do it yourself. Repairs are fantastic right up until you accidentally build a mobile death trap. A rural brake shop had a guy roll in, complaining his car sounded like a wood chipper at every stoplight. They pulled the wheels off and discovered pure insanity. The man had cut blocks of solid oak plywood and superglued them directly to his brake calipers. When told he was inches away from a catastrophic crash, the guy just rolled his eyes and complained that mahogany would have held up much better. 5. Exorcisms are not usually covered under the factory warranty. A terrified woman dropped off her minivan claiming it was fully possessed by a demon. It randomly locked doors, blared the horn at strangers, and cranked the radio to maximum volume while driving. After tearing apart the electrical system, mechanics finally found the true evil spirit. Her massively heavy purse was sitting on the passenger seat, completely crushing her spare key fob every single time she hit a bump in the road. 6. Nothing says luxury quite like accusing a certified technician of planting contraband under your hood. A businessman stormed into a high-end dealership furious about a violent engine rattle and a smell exactly like roasted campfire snacks. The mechanic popped the hood and unleashed an absolute avalanche of toasted walnuts. A local squirrel had converted the V8 engine into a winter bakery. The best part? The customer genuinely accused the staff of dumping nuts on his engine block just to upsell a premium detailing package. 7. Upgrading your engine usually requires actual parts, not an amateur science experiment at the pump. A guy towed his tiny hatchback to a garage, screaming that the engine violently choked and died after filling up. The mechanic took one sniff and realized the tank was pumped full of thick green diesel. The customer proudly admitted he did it on purpose. His flawless logic? He read online that diesel is thicker and assumed it would instantly give his little economy car heavy-duty towing power. 8. Blinker fluid is the oldest mechanic joke in the book, but nobody expects it to start a screaming match. An enraged woman marched into an auto parts store demanding a gallon of premium blinker fluid. The poor clerk spent 20 minutes trying to gently explain that her husband was just playing a cruel prank on her. Did she call her husband to yell at him? Absolutely not. She accused the store of blatant sexism and demanded they check the back room for their hidden stash. 9. Buying a sports car with a manual transmission to look cool is great, provided you actually know how to drive one. A teenager brought his brand new car back on day 3, absolutely livid. He claimed the engine was blown, constantly screaming, and completely refused to go over 40 miles per hour. The service manager took a 5-second test drive and realized the horrifying truth. The kid never once shifted out of first gear. He drove on the interstate for 3 solid days, sounding like a lawnmower. 10. Investigating mystery odors is the absolute worst part of working on cars. One arrogant customer demanded a free climate control replacement, claiming the factory installed a defective cabin filter that smelled like an open grave. The tech dismantled the dashboard and pulled out a massive, rotting steak burrito from deep inside the vents. The customer crossed his arms and aggressively denied ever eating in his vehicle. A truly bold lie, considering the fast food receipt was literally stuck to the foil with his exact credit card name printed right on top. 11. Imagine raging at a mechanic for literally stealing your entire engine. A guy bought a vintage Porsche at an auction and immediately towed it to a shop, screaming that thieves had completely gutted the front hood. The service manager calmly walked out, opened the rear trunk, and pointed at the massive flat-6 motor sitting right there. Did the guy admit his embarrassing mistake? Of course not. He demanded to know why the factory installed it backward and threatened to call the police. 12. Winter driving is stressful enough without thinking your car is trying to physically attack you. A furious driver rolled into a dealership demanding they fix the defective vibrating foot massager in his brake pedal. He claimed that every time he hit an icy patch, the pedal violently assaulted his foot. The technician had to bite his tongue to keep from laughing while explaining the concept of an anti-lock braking system. The customer was absolutely disgusted and demanded they uninstall the safety feature immediately. 13. Routine maintenance is apparently a completely foreign concept to some folks. A young guy stormed into a lube shop with a brilliant engineering critique, aggressively demanding a much longer oil dipstick. He claimed the factory one was entirely too short because it stopped reaching the oil in his engine about a month ago. The mechanic stared at him in utter disbelief. Instead of just buying a $10 quart of oil to top off his completely dry engine, this genius wanted a custom dipstick to reach the bottom of the pan. 14. Paranoia can make people see some truly wild things. One terrified woman brought her sedan in, completely convinced she was being targeted by an elite sniper. Her evidence? A tiny blinking red light that mysteriously appeared on her dashboard every single time she locked the doors. The mechanic had to gently explain that it was just the standard factory anti-theft indicator. She flat out refused to believe him, slapped duct tape over the sensor, and demanded the shop sweep the parking lot for hitmen. 15. Mechanics see plenty of strange things under a chassis, but one suspension check became an instant shop legend. A furious guy demanded a full inspection, complaining of a violent rhythmic slapping noise at highway speeds. He swore his entire transmission was falling apart. The technicians hoisted the truck up and immediately burst into tears laughing. A massive, neon purple adult toy had been zip-tied to his drive shaft as a bachelor party prank. The customer was so embarrassed he practically threw his credit card at them and sped off. 16. Basic driving skills are apparently totally optional for some vehicle owners. A guy actually tried to sue a dealership after he plowed his brand new truck straight into a ditch. His excuse was pure comedy gold. He claimed he set the cruise control to 65 miles per hour, took his hands off the wheel to eat a burger, and the truck completely failed to navigate a sharp curve. He genuinely believed that standard cruise control meant the car was a fully autonomous, self-driving robot. 17. Conspiracy theories and auto repair are a spectacularly bad combination. A heavily caffeinated man barged into a local garage demanding they immediately cut a secret government tracking device off the bottom of his completely average commuter car. The mechanic took a quick look underneath and delivered the bad news. The mysterious metal cylinder was his catalytic converter. The customer called the mechanic a deep-state operative, grabbed a hacksaw from the tool bench, and tried to cut his own exhaust system in half. 18. You really cannot fix stupid, even with a premium warranty. A luxury car owner threw an absolute temper tantrum because the interior of his expensive new convertible kept getting soaking wet during thunderstorms. The catch? He refused to put the roof up. He aggressively argued that if the dealership sold him a truly aerodynamic vehicle, the windshield would create an invisible force field that deflected the rain right over his head. The service advisor just blinked and offered him a complimentary umbrella. 19. Panic makes people jump to the most absurd conclusions possible. A completely hysterical driver pulled into a tire shop, screaming that his car was actively secreting highly toxic yellow battery acid from the wheel wells. He demanded a full hazardous materials cleanup on the spot. The tech walked out, rubbed the bright yellow sludge with his thumb, and smelled it. The guy had simply driven through freshly painted road lines and sprayed wet yellow paint all over his own fenders. 20. Working under the hood is scary enough without dealing with imaginary wildlife. A very stressed woman dragged her SUV into a shop, furious that they sold her a car infested with rattlesnakes. She heard a loud hissing noise from the engine and responded by emptying 3 full cans of toxic bug spray right into the air conditioning vents. The massive snake turned out to be a tiny $10 cracked vacuum hose. Now she had a fixed engine and a cabin that smelled like chemical warfare. 21. It is amazing how a basic anti-theft feature can turn a grown adult into a raging toddler. A guy called a tow truck because his steering wheel was permanently jammed, claiming the internal steering column had violently exploded. The mechanic walked up to the car, wiggled the steering wheel a fraction of an inch, and turned the key. The engine purred to life instantly. The customer was so mad at his own stupidity that he accused the mechanic of using illegal lockpicking magic to make him look bad. 22. Deflecting the blame is practically an Olympic sport at repair shops. A guy stormed in demanding a brand new interior because his air conditioning was supposedly blowing toxic black mold everywhere. The smell was honestly enough to knock a grown man out. Mechanics tore the cabin apart looking for the source, only to find the horror show hiding in the trunk. The guy had spilled a giant gallon of milk 3 weeks prior during a heat wave and somehow convinced himself it was a mechanical failure. 23. Sometimes a complaint is just a really weird flex in disguise. A guy bought a high-performance muscle car and brought it back a month later with a totally straight face, demanding the dealership pay for his 6 recent speeding tickets. He argued the gas pedal was dangerously sensitive and the car was simply too fast for a normal human to control. When the manager suggested he just stop pushing his foot all the way to the floor, the guy threatened to call the local news. 24. Automotive lighting is apparently a deeply confusing concept. A woman pulled up to a service lane, screaming that her headlights were completely broken and installed on the wrong side of the car. The confused technician asked her to demonstrate the problem. She threw the car in reverse, pointed at the reflection in the shop window, and furiously yelled that her front headlights were glowing white in the back. The poor mechanic had to spend 10 minutes explaining the literal concept of reverse lights. 25. Modern technology is great until the battery dies and panic sets in. A guy totally destroyed his own steering column trying to hotwire his push-to-start hybrid vehicle. He was furious, claiming the start button was a scam that permanently locked him out of his own engine. A mechanic arrived, popped open the guy's plastic key fob, and swapped out a $2 watch battery. The car started perfectly. The man had caused thousands of dollars in damage because he did not know keys needed batteries. 26. Nothing beats the confidence of a customer who is completely and utterly wrong. A guy in Chicago was absolutely livid that his luxury sedan had a defective heating system in the dead of winter. He aggressively poked the center console, yelling that he was turning the heat all the way up to 30, but he was still freezing. The technician gently grabbed the guy's hand and moved it 2 inches to the left. He had been furiously turning up the radio volume dial for 3 days straight. 27. Have you ever been so mad you defied the laws of physics? A petite lady barged into a dealership demanding a refund because her brand new compact car was physically shrinking. She swore that over the past week, the steering wheel and pedals had moved significantly closer to her face. A mechanic hopped in, pushed the power seat button back, and magically restored the car to its original size. Her husband had driven it over the weekend and simply forgot to slide the seat back. 28. Following directions blindly is a fantastic way to ruin a perfectly good transmission. A soaking wet driver had his sedan towed into a shop, completely enraged that the factory navigation system tried to assassinate him. He demanded $1 million settlement because the pleasant automated voice told him to turn right, so he immediately cranked the wheel and drove straight into a man-made duck pond. He firmly believed the car should have automatically deployed a braking parachute to stop him from drowning. 29. The check engine light strikes pure terror into the hearts of bad drivers everywhere. One guy was ready to physically fight a mechanic because his dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree and the car was running incredibly rough. He demanded a totally free engine rebuild. The tech walked out, screwed the completely loose gas cap back on until it clicked, and the engine smoothed out instantly. The customer was so deeply offended by the easy fix that he peeled out of the parking lot in a rage. 30. Audio troubleshooting sometimes requires a degree in demonology. A teenager pulled into a stereo shop practically in tears, claiming his used hatchback was playing demonic subliminal messages backward. He demanded they rip the entire sound system out to save his soul. The technician hit the eject button and pulled out a badly scratched, extremely dirty heavy metal compact disc. It was skipping endlessly on a weird guitar riff. The kid was entirely convinced he had bought a cursed vehicle from an underground cult. 31. Buying advanced technology is pointless if you refuse to learn what it actually is. An owner towed their brand new electric vehicle into the service bay, practically foaming at the mouth. They threw open the hood and screamed that chop shop thieves had completely stolen the engine overnight. The service manager stared at the empty frunk, then looked the guy dead in the eye, and had to explain the entire concept of battery-powered cars. The customer was so humiliated, he accused the dealership of tricking him into buying a giant golf cart. 32. Can you imagine threatening to call the highway patrol on a mechanic? One terrified driver refused to take her crossover on the freeway because she swore she was doing 100 miles an hour while everyone else was passing her. The technician took a ride and immediately realized the problem. She was staring at the tachometer instead of the speedometer. When told her engine was just revving really high in first gear, she aggressively argued that numbers are numbers. 33. Some drivers really view glowing dashboard warning lights as mere suggestions. A guy marched into a garage demanding a full engine replacement because his sports car was sluggish, smelled like a bonfire, and got terrible gas mileage. The mechanic hopped in, reached down, and disengaged the parking brake the guy had been driving on for 3 straight weeks. Instead of thanking the tech, the customer demanded compensation for his completely obliterated rear brake pads. 34. Winter driving hacks found on the internet are a mechanic's absolute worst nightmare. A truck owner dragged his pickup into a shop complaining that the ride was so rough it was shattering his teeth. The technicians went to check the tire pressure and water literally sprayed everywhere. This genius read online that adding weight improves winter traction, so he filled all 4 tires to the brim with a garden hose. He actually expected the shop to cover the water damage. 35. Visibility is kind of important when piloting a 2-ton metal box. A woman stormed into an auto glass repair center, completely enraged, claiming the brand new windshield wipers they sold her were actively destroying her glass. The mechanic walked outside and was absolutely speechless. She had somehow managed to install the wiper blades completely upside down, dragging bare metal across her windshield for miles. She furiously insisted the store sold her intentionally defective rubber. 36. Panic makes people abandon all logic in the blink of an eye. A terrified college student pulled into a body shop, hyperventilating, claiming her compact car was melting from a highly corrosive acid rainstorm. The estimator grabbed a rag, walked over to the bubbly, sticky mess on the hood and wiped it off. It was just an absurd amount of sticky pine sap from the tree she parked under every single day. She seriously wanted her insurance to declare it a total loss. 37. There is nothing quite like screaming at a professional because you forgot how basic physics work. A very angry older gentleman threatened to sue a dealership for selling him a defective luxury sedan with entirely useless side mirrors. The poor service advisor walked out to the parking lot and simply pushed the mirrors outward. The guy had gone through an automatic car wash a week ago. The brushes folded the mirrors flat against the doors, and he just never bothered to pop them back out. 38. Diagnosing a mystery noise is standard, but diagnosing a mystery honk is hilarious. A lady brought her minivan in, complaining that it aggressively honked at pedestrians every time she made a sharp left turn. The mechanics were totally baffled until they removed the steering wheel cover. An incredibly stale, rock-hard bagel was wedged perfectly under the horn pad. Instead of laughing, she angrily demanded to know who planted breakfast pastry in her steering column. 39. Leaking fluids are a genuine cause for concern, unless you are completely terrible at identifying liquids. A panicking guy dragged his hatchback into a bay, screaming that the engine was bleeding highly toxic rainbow fluid all over his pristine driveway. The mechanic took a quick look and sighed heavily. It was just condensation from his air conditioning dripping onto a tiny oil stain in his own garage. The customer refused to accept this and demanded a biohazard cleanup crew. 40. Accusing a repair shop of grand larceny is an incredibly bold move. A furious businessman brought his luxury coupe in, violently pointing at the center console and claiming the car was literally stealing his money. He swore he dropped a $50 bill and the seat swallowed it whole. The tech spent an hour unbolting the heavy leather chair, only to find 3 pennies and a heavily fossilized French fry. The guy aggressively checked his own pockets, found the cash, and left without apologizing. 41. Automotive symbols are not literal magic spells, but some people genuinely think otherwise. A heavily bundled-up driver barged into a shop during a blizzard, livid that her winter mode button was totally defective. She aggressively tapped the little snowflake icon on her dashboard, complaining that it had not stopped the snowstorm outside her windows. The mechanic had to gently explain that the button merely adjusted the transmission. It did not give her the superpower to control the local weather. 42. Adding fluids to your car should be easy, but one teenager turned it into a massive catastrophe. He had his parents tow his dead sedan to a garage, complaining that it violently seized up on the highway. The mechanic unscrewed the gas cap and immediately smelled thick motor oil. The kid proudly admitted he wanted to top off his engine oil, so he poured 4 quarts directly into the fuel tank. He genuinely thought all the car liquids mixed together in one big stomach. 43. Technology can be terrifying if you refuse to understand it. An older woman rolled into a sound shop demanding an entirely new radio because hers had been hacked by foreign spies. She was absolutely panicked because the stereo had only played Spanish accordion music for 3 days straight. The technician reached in, pressed the FM button, and instantly brought back her local country station. She had accidentally bumped the AM dial and genuinely believed her car was intercepted by a cartel. 44. Operating a vehicle requires a bare minimum of situational awareness. One very angry guy called a mobile mechanic to his office parking lot, absolutely furious that his automatic transmission had locked up completely. The tech arrived, looked through the window, and saw the gear shifter was sitting dead center in drive. He opened the door, bumped it up into park, and turned the key. The guy was so embarrassed he actually tried to argue the shifter slipped down on its own. 45. Ghost noises in a cabin will drive anyone completely insane. A frazzled mom brought her SUV in, complaining of a rhythmic, taunting ticking sound that never stopped, even when the engine was completely off. Mechanics tore apart the dashboard, checked the relays, and probed the wiring harness. What did they find? Her kid's battery-powered musical metronome had fallen deep into the rear air vent and was quietly ticking its life away. She instantly blamed the dealership for making the vents too big. 46. Blaming your car for the current season is peak entitlement. A sweating, red-faced driver stormed into a service lane in mid-July, screaming that the air conditioning was a total scam because his back was burning up. The The service manager leaned into the cabin and noticed the heated seat dial was cranked to maximum roast. When pointed out, the customer yelled that the expensive car should be smart enough to know it is summer and disable the feature automatically. 47. Animal control usually does not answer calls at auto repair shops, but one mechanic almost dialed them. A terrified guy jumped out of his truck, screaming that a massive black snake was thrashing around under his hood. The entire service team cautiously approached with broom handles, ready for a fight. They popped the hood to find his snapped serpentine belt flapping wildly against the engine block. The customer insisted they were lying and demanded to see the dead reptile. 48. Key fobs are basically magic, but they still have geographical limits. A woman called the dealership furious, demanding a full refund for her remote start system because it was completely useless. She claimed it never worked from her kitchen window. The mechanic asked her to demonstrate. She stood in her kitchen, pointed the key fob directly at her microwave, and pressed the button. She literally thought it worked like a television remote and had to be aimed at an appliance inside the house. 49. Misunderstanding standard features is a daily occurrence, but this one takes the cake. A guy bought a used luxury SUV and returned a week later, practically foaming at the mouth. He furiously complained that the blinker stalk was defective because it only let him signal left. The mechanic hopped in, pushed the stalk upward, and the right blinker clicked on perfectly. The driver was totally dumbfounded. He literally thought you had to push down for both directions and was just circling the block for days. 50. You would think removing packaging is common sense, but some drivers really challenge that assumption. A very angry guy brought his brand new pickup truck back to the lot, complaining that the premium leather seats were incredibly loud and sweaty. The salesman walked out and just stared in pure disbelief. The guy had been driving around for 2 months, sitting directly on the thick, crinkly plastic factory shipping covers. He angrily argued the dealership should have provided an unboxing manual. 51. Dodging a massive lawsuit is just another Tuesday for a seasoned mechanic. A furious driver sped into a service bay, practically ripping his steering wheel off. He threw his car into park and started screaming that his luxury brakes were completely ignoring him. The mechanic got into the driver's seat for a quick spin and almost crashed into the toolboxes. The guy had accidentally wedged a giant, half-empty bottle of diet soda tightly behind the brake pedal. When shown the incredibly obvious problem, he didn't even apologize. He just complained about the brand of soda. 52. It takes a special kind of confidence to argue with a professional mechanic about basic automotive anatomy. A woman aggressively demanded a full engine rebuild for her completely dead compact car. She confidently stated the engine had clearly blown up because the battery was missing. The service advisor gently opened her trunk, pointed to the factory-installed rear battery compartment, and hooked up the jumper cables. Did she admit her mistake? No. She threatened to call the Better Business Bureau for hiding essential car parts in the back. 53. If you hear a horrible grinding noise every time you move, maybe stop moving. A completely unbothered guy drove his heavy-duty pickup truck 20 miles down the interstate, violently dragging a sparking, metal screeching mess behind him. He rolled into a dealership service center, complaining of a slight vibration in the rear end. The technicians walked back and found his heavy steel trailer hitch was basically welded to the pavement. He had forgotten to raise his trailer jack before driving off and destroyed the whole assembly. 54. Modern car features are designed to help you, not actively mock you. A totally irate businessman stormed into a high-end auto shop, demanding they permanently disconnect the dashboard chime. He claimed the car aggressively beeped at him specifically to ruin his important phone calls. The mechanic grabbed the guy's keys, clicked his seatbelt in, and the horrible noise magically stopped. The customer had been driving around for 6 months unbuckled, completely convinced his $80,000 car was just judging his driving skills. 55. Basic maintenance requires reading at least 1 page of the manual. A frantic college student had her crossover towed to an independent garage, completely hysterical that her transmission exploded in a giant cloud of white smoke. The mechanic lifted the hood, unscrewed the oil cap, and found pure, unadulterated chaos. She had decided to change her own oil but completely forgot to drain the old stuff first. She dumped an extra 6 quarts into an already full engine, turning her car into a massive rolling smoke machine. 56. Upgrading your suspension usually costs thousands of dollars, unless you visit a sporting goods store. A furious teenager demanded the dealership fix his sports car, complaining that the rear end bounced violently over every single pothole. Technicians put the car on a lift and found absolute madness. He had tightly packed 4 dozen neon green tennis balls inside his rear coil springs. When told he basically turned his car into a giant toy, he just complained that the internet promised him a smoother ride. 57. Upgrading your sound system is a rite of passage, but knowing how to use it is essential. A teenager brought his customized hatchback back to the audio shop, absolutely furious that the giant subwoofers in his trunk were broken. He aggressively cranked the volume knob to maximum and yelled that there was absolutely no bass. The technician reached out, pressed the tiny equalizer button right next to the dial, and nearly blew the back window out. The kid had been listening to flat audio for a month straight. 58. Some drivers really think their cars are out to get them personally. A highly agitated woman dragged her SUV into a service bay, screaming that the driver's seat was actively trying to crush her ribcage. She demanded a completely new electronic seat track mechanism on the spot. A mechanic reached down and pulled a massive, rock-hard leather purse out from behind the motorized seatback. It was totally jamming the gears. The woman aggressively grabbed her bag and stomped off without even saying thank you. 59. Transmission fluid is apparently just a suggestion for some home mechanics. A guy limped his heavily smoking pickup truck into a bay, screaming that the dealership sold him a defective transmission. The mechanic pulled the dipstick and immediately smelled French fries. The customer proudly admitted he topped off his transmission with a gallon of premium peanut oil from his deep fryer. He aggressively argued that if it can handle a 30-pound Thanksgiving turkey, it can easily handle shifting gears on the highway. 60. Ignoring warning lights is bad enough, but ignoring literal fire is next-level ignorance. A completely oblivious guy rolled into a service center with thick black smoke pouring out from under his hood, complaining of a weird smell. The technicians ran out with fire extinguishers and doused his completely melted alternator. When asked why he didn't pull over when the engine caught on fire, the guy shrugged and said he thought the heater was just working really well. 61. Nothing beats the pure confidence of a totally uneducated vehicle owner. A guy stormed into a tire shop demanding 4 brand new, free replacements because his current tires were completely bald in the middle. The mechanic took one look, grabbed a gauge, and realized the guy was running 80 pounds of pressure in tires rated for 35. When confronted, the customer proudly admitted he filled them up until they looked nice and bouncy, completely ignoring the giant warning numbers printed directly on the sidewall. 62. Paranoia and modern infotainment systems are a hilariously bad combination. An extremely stressed guy barged into a service center, demanding they rip his entire dashboard out because a ghost was living in the radio. He swore he kept hearing heavy breathing and coughing every time he drove to work. The tech paired his phone to check the audio, only to discover the customer's teenage son had left an iPad under the passenger seat. It was actively connected to a live group voice chat with his gaming friends. 63. Winter survival tactics really need to be vetted before implementation. A freezing guy brought his pickup truck in, completely enraged that his windshield defroster was blowing ice-cold air during a blizzard. The mechanic popped the hood and stared in absolute horror. The guy had completely bypassed his heater core with duct tape and garden hose because a friend told him it would make the engine run faster. Instead of getting a faster truck, he basically built a mobile meat locker for his daily commute. 64. Sometimes a horrible noise is just a reminder of your own terrible life choices. A frantic mom rushed her minivan into a shop demanding they fix the screeching banshee trapped inside her dashboard. Mechanics tore apart the instrument cluster, checked the blower motor, and found absolutely nothing. Finally, one tech looked in the CD player slot and hit eject. A sticky, jam-covered children's music disc slowly popped out. Her toddler had jammed it in there sideways, and it had been violently grinding against the internal gears for days. 65. Blaming a mechanic for something you did yourself requires an incredible lack of self-awareness. An angry dude barged into a local garage claiming they totally ruined his alignment during his last oil change. He swore the car aggressively pulled to the right ever since he picked it up. The tech hopped in for a test drive and immediately felt the violent swerve. The guy had completely deflated his front right tire, driving over a massive curb, and somehow convinced himself it was a mechanical failure. 66. Dealing with unusual smells is a gamble, but this one was an absolute disaster. A luxury car owner demanded a completely new air conditioning compressor, claiming the factory unit was actively pumping the smell of rotting fish directly into his face. The technicians spent hours tearing the entire front end apart looking for the source. They finally found the horrifying truth hidden beneath the passenger seat. The guy went fishing 3 weeks ago and completely lost an entire bag of bait under his expensive floor mats. 67. Defending your terrible ideas to a professional is a wildly bold strategy. A guy brought his sports car in completely livid that his custom exhaust system was rattling his teeth out. The mechanic crawled underneath and was completely speechless. The customer had removed his mufflers entirely and replaced them with straight, hollow aluminum downspouts from a home improvement store. When told he basically built a giant metal kazoo, the guy aggressively argued that it increased his horsepower by at least 50%. 68. Understanding the literal dimensions of your vehicle is crucial for survival. A furious woman demanded a dealership replace her completely shattered side mirror, claiming the car was too wide for standard city streets. The service manager watched the dashcam footage and had to break the hilarious news. She hadn't hit a narrow street. She had aggressively sideswiped a massive concrete pillar in a parking garage while going 20 miles an hour. She honestly believed the car should have automatically sucked the mirror in to avoid the crash. 69. The absolute pinnacle of automotive absurdity involves defying the basic laws of physics. A guy practically kicked down the door of a service center, screaming that his brand new luxury sedan was literally stealing his gas while he slept. He demanded a $1 million investigation into fuel line sabotage. The mechanic popped the hood, checked the lines, and everything was absolutely flawless. The customer aggressively shoved his fuel receipts in the manager's face. He was driving 150 miles a day for his new commute and genuinely believed the car should magically refill itself overnight. Be honest. Who here has actually driven for months with a blinking check engine light, secretly hoping it just magically fixes itself? Or are you brave enough to admit you have topped off the wrong fluid like our peanut oil genius? Drop your most embarrassing car mistake in the comments right now so we can judge you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and go check your blinker fluid.